Welcome to the very first episode of Behind the Grind, the YouTube and podcast series that explores stories of the personal side of entrepreneurship. I'm your host, Julianne Keu, and in each episode I'll be sitting down with a different entrepreneur for an honest conversation about their path to success. But first, I wanted to talk to you guys a little bit about the reasons why I started this series. I think we live in a day and age in which there is absolutely no shortage of success stories or playbooks for crushing it. And while I think there's a place in our lexicon for these positive and aspirational messages, I think that they're just one half of the conversation that we ought to be having. Success, as I've learned, is not just the culmination of good decisions over time. It's wisdom born of failure, purpose born of pain, and a genuine conviction that is cultivated from the emptiness of the platitudes that might initially guide us. I look back on my own career, having built 3 businesses and sold 2, and I think of failure and adversity as being some of my greatest teachers. Being in the trenches has taught me more than any book or program could ever do. And to think, if I could learn so much from the depths of my own experiences, the good, the bad, and everything in between, how much can I learn from the experiences of others? Behind the Grind is not meant to be your typical how I built it kind of show. Although our guests represent various industries and stages of their career, you'll find that they all share at least one thing in common, and that is a commitment to leading with vulnerability. My hope for this series is that it will create a space for open dialogue and authentic ideas, and I hope you'll find in my guests a network of kindred spirits and mentors at every step of your journey. So today we begin in episode 1, and I've asked my friend Rebecca Rochon to join me for this episode. Rebecca is somebody who just gets it. She's an entrepreneur. She's the founder of Pivot and Pilot Creative, one of the most popular boutique branding agencies here in the greater Vancouver area. I trust her because she's just one of my closest friends, and I wanted to start by telling my own story. So without further ado, episode 1, the story of me.
So you talk a lot about the incubator marketing here, the last agency that you ran. And I think that viewers want to know a bit about what happened before that. So you had 2 businesses before that. Can you talk a little bit about all of your businesses and your entrepreneurial journey?
Yeah, in 2 minutes or less, just kidding. So I sort of fell into this by accident. I didn't come from a family of entrepreneurs or anything. When I was younger, this wasn't something that I wanted to do. I wouldn't even say I was particularly entrepreneurial by nature. I was in school for political science originally, and then 2 years in I realized politics is not the way to change the world. And I had a little bit of a crisis of faith because, I knew that I wouldn't have the privilege of maybe taking some time on my parents' dime to figure out what it was that I wanted to do. So I started working while finishing the rest of my degree. And the only places that would hire me were startups. And I remember working at my first startup and just thinking I could do this better than my bosses. So... And, 6 months later, that startup tanked. So I learned a little bit about, startup failure, something that is very, very probable. I essentially, my first business, I wouldn't even call it a business. I call it my Play-Doh business. It was a lifestyle magazine, an online lifestyle magazine.
I think everyone has that though, that first business that they don't really realize was a business until later.
Yeah.
Everyone who has that first starting point where it's something that they were really excited to do and they put a lot of work into it and even coordinated people, but then.
Yeah, so that's exactly what I did. Mm-hmm. I was a kid with a laptop and access to the internet. I learned how to build websites, and so that's what I did. And then I hired freelance writers from all over. But the interesting thing is that around this time, nobody was really using social media for organic lead generation. And And what I was doing then, and I kid you not, I was doing like mass following on Twitter, back when people were actually using Twitter. What's so interesting is around this time, nobody was really using social media for organic lead generation.
Right.
Like social media was a newer thing. I think around this time, people were just like, Twitter had become the platform of choice for everybody. I started doing this thing called mass following, which is very self-explanatory. And using a bot, I would follow thousands of people through my, this brand, this lifestyle website's account. And people would follow back. And in a very short period of time, I was legitimately garnering like thousands of unique visitors to my website every month, essentially for free. So kept that running for a little bit, for about a year or so. But then I discovered that the whole magazine, the online website, like ad selling model it wasn't profitable. Basically, it was hinged on me hustling, and I was still in school. And anyways, at some point I just decided to give up. I kept all of the assets online, which 2 years later I would go on to sell to a company based in Richmond. My second business was a startup in the social media data mining space. And I started that after my first full-time job at another startup in the AI image recognition space. Basically started off at that startup as a social media manager because that's all I could do. I was an arts grad, whatever. They hired me for social media, and very quickly, within 6 months, I was promoted to marketing director. I proved that I had better ideas than the guy with the MBA who I had formerly had to like directly report to. Then my ego got really big, and I thought again that I could do it better than my bosses. So I quit, and then I co-founded Targeted Tweets, which was in Twitter data mining. I ran that for a little bit, and then my co-founder moved to San Francisco to go to law school. Then I was like, what the heck? Turns out that piece of technology, the IP, was worth something, and with that I was able to raise some seed capital for the incubator marketing, which is my marketing agency, and probably the business that most of you guys know me for.
Yeah.
That was the beginning of the incubator.
That's where I met you.
Yeah, when we were working for the same client.
Yeah.
So I would say the incubator was my first successful, okay, I wouldn't say that.
They all sound pretty successful to me. And you were so young too.
But with that, I was, at its height, the incubator, like, it was nice, like being able to hire people full time, being able to work on really cool contracts, with clients, et cetera, et cetera. And then I ran that until January 2019.
So what really happened to the incubator marketing?
Like why we closed?
Sure, yeah.
So 2018 was it started off as a really good year. We had grown really fast. We were expecting some really big contracts to come in. And then in the spring, it seemed like I'd say the spring was the beginning of the end. It just started with getting the news that my co-founder was pregnant. And then 2 weeks later, top marketing lead. She's like really, really talented. We had invested quite a bit in training her and getting her to the position that she was in. She got poached by another company.
Oh man.
And on the personal side, I was broken up with. This is all on my blog. I've written about it.
It's crazy how much people matter when it's a service-based business though, like that. Like that's how it's just a couple key people and it can just rock your world. Yeah, it's so hard. And it's like all those things are just life that got in the way, and it's crazy. So much can change so quickly.
We had also been anticipating 2 really big contracts that would have changed it really would have changed the strategic direction of the company.
Yeah.
And I put a lot into those bets.
Mm-hmm.
Again, my ego probably played a part in this, which is a running theme in my life. Those contracts didn't pan out, and that happened around the same time as well. So
maybe it's just optimism more than the other.
Right?
Yeah.
But being an entrepreneur, I was trained to not sulk too much over bad news.
Of course.
To always look for the opportunity on the other side of each obstacle. And so that was my truly, like, I gave myself a weekend to grieve, and then the following Monday I was back at it. I was determined to make this work no matter what.
Right.
And so for the next 6 months, I think I was just like pulling 5 hours sleeps, just determined to
like
get our company like through this. And also at the same time, my co-founder was pregnant. I really didn't, and I knew how much she wanted this pregnancy.
Yeah.
So I really didn't want to place a ton of stress on her. I really took it on myself. Mind you, this is somebody who is, maybe we can get into this a little bit later, who is co-founder by name, but not in equity, something that she wanted. It was her choice. But this is someone who came in at a very pivotal time in the beginning, and it was really important to me that I was able to support her as well.
A lot of pressure.
Yeah, so I took a lot on myself, and we recruited a new like all-star member to the team, and she was poised to basically become my new business partner. And at the very last moment before things were going to become official, she realized that she couldn't take on that role. And I realized that I didn't want to be doing this anymore. I know it sounds really cliche. I just didn't. By the end of 2018, I realized I couldn't see myself running a marketing agency anymore, that nothing would make it all worth it. Nothing. Like no amount, no dollar value, nothing.
Because you were just in such a place where you needed to have like some freedom and space for yourself.
It felt like, one of the benefits of feeling like you're at rock bottom is also you don't have anything to lose, which grants you a certain amount of freedom to make decisions that are hopefully more meaningful to you. And I think subconsciously at that point I knew, it was like, this could be an opportunity for me to do something meaningful. And I didn't know what that was at the time, but I knew that I wasn't in my position, the position that I was in.
You needed that purpose.
Yeah, so towards the end of 2018, we had started phasing people out. It was really important to me that the staff on my team were also taken care of, and so they were given an adequate amount of time. I helped them find new job opportunities in some cases.
That's awesome.
And this is also around the same time that I think we were talking a lot because, and your role, you get really emotional.
Aww. It's hard.
I just really appreciated being able to call you up and just talk to you, and you being someone who, could understand what I was going through.
I do it to you now all the time too, so you get me right back. But yeah, it's true. You need someone to talk to about these things. So it's not everyone chooses that path, right?
Yeah. So you really helped me get through that period of my life.
That's good.
What was the question?
I was like, embrace. Next question. What do you think the hardest thing was about closing your marketing agency?
It was basically being stripped of all the things that I thought I knew, the things that held my life together. Like, I couldn't tell you how different my life was from the beginning of 2018 to the end of 2018. Just in the one year alone. moving out of my office, but also it was also like the dismantling of certain relationships in my life. And the one in question is the one that I had with my co-founder. I realized this is someone who's really dear to me and really important. But also I realized that relationship wasn't healthy, and so I needed to let it go, and that was a huge source of heartbreak for me. And I spent a lot of this year, 2019, trying to make sense of it. And I think at this point I've gotten to a place where I have closure now, but that was also a really, really hard thing. And I can't disentangle it from the rest, from running a business, because again, in a service-based business, relationships are key, and I'm talking about sort of the dismantling of a key relationship.
Yeah. What do you think some of your biggest mistakes were? Just, I guess, in your whole journey, or some things that you'd recommend people to, avoid.
So for me, and I have an interesting way of looking at mistakes, is that, I mean, have I made mistakes getting here? Of course I have. I've made a ton of mistakes. It's the only way to get there. But would I go back and change them? Not necessarily, because my mistakes have turned into really big, like, learning opportunities, and I wouldn't be here without all of the mistakes that I've made in the past. But if I could give some advice to anybody who is starting anew, I would probably say, don't.
Don't do it.
But emotional fortitude is huge. I would say it's like the most important thing that any entrepreneur can have. It's the most important quality, and I don't think I had that in the beginning. I was like a really proud, egotistical nerd.
But you had such like strength though, and gumption, you know? Like those are all really important things too. But
I think it was enough to like basically
just, like,
get me like to jump in or get started. But at the same time, I look back and like, I didn't really have a choice, because I grew up in a working class immigrant family. My parents stopped supporting me when I was like 13. I had to start working at 14 just to like pay for my basics. And so I was always like really, I think like financially, I was always obsessed with making something of myself now.
Yeah.
And I did things really fast. I graduated from high school at 16 so I could just like GTFO and get out there in the world. Like other people might see it as tenacity or gumption. Mm-hmm. For me, I really felt like I had no other choice. Mm-hmm. As for the advice that I might have for anybody who is watching who does have a choice, the only thing I would say is to not underestimate the importance of emotional fortitude, because you're going to need it to help you get through the really tough times. And I look at you, for example, like you are an example of somebody who, like your EQ is through the roof. And then I look at how you like wither problems and just handle setbacks in your own entrepreneurial journey. And I'm just like, wow.
Well, I didn't have, I guess, like from my end though, like maybe I had that part, but I definitely had like to work really hard and still work really hard on like the confidence and the kind of like presence. Like you have a very confident presence right away, and you made all of these like super like risks, and you were really inserting yourself into these conversations and stuff. So I mean, like maybe I don't know, we all have different things that are our strengths, but yeah,
Right.
it's definitely like, yeah, like we look to each other for different things for sure, but but thank you. There you go. There's my confidence again. I can't take a
But
compliment.
what I'm talking about is like so the difference between somebody with emotional fortitude and someone who doesn't is that the person who doesn't have emotional fortitude, when they make mistakes, they might internalize it.
Right.
Or
Yeah.
they might not be aware of their own boundaries, so they might take on too much and stretch themselves too thin.
Right.
I just think if you don't have emotional fortitude, if you make it out at the end of this, you're probably gonna get to a place where you will have it, because it's what it is required to
Get there.
survive and succeed as an entrepreneur. I'm really grateful that this is the path that I took, because entrepreneurship has been a really good mechanism for revealing my weaknesses and allowing me to in turn work on them.
You can't really get away with like blaming things, you know, like you have to always see because like you're the one who's making the decisions, and it's like you're kind of, the whole thing is you're making your own lifestyle and destiny or whatever. But you can't help but you have to be so good at recognizing like what you're doing and how that's affecting things and
You
stuff
have
like
to be
that, or else
really
you're
self-aware.
you're forced to be super self-aware when you can't lean on, oh well, it's this or this. I mean, some people do, but they don't get very far with that, right? Like making those types of
Therapy
decisions.
helps too.
Yeah,
Oh my gosh, I cannot.
it's amazing.
I cannot, like,
it's the key.
I can't speak enough on the benefits of therapy, and I know it's a great privilege to be able to go and see a therapist. A lot of intention with regards to working on myself and working on my weaknesses and things like that. Not weaknesses, insecurities.
Sure. Yeah, but you've really and you've definitely inspired me to really continue with therapy, because I took a huge break after university when it was free. So
That wasn't even really therapy.
Yeah, probably not.
That was going to a counselor and telling them all the reasons why they should help you change your F to a withdraw or whatever. That was the story of my life.
Was their insight into your life.
Yeah, seriously.
So now you're starting another business. And what did it take? What was stirring in you to make you do this? And what are your plans with this one?
So just for the viewers listening, this current business that Rebecca is referring to is exactly what you're seeing here behind the grind. Very meta. And this is fully funded. This is my full-time thing now. Hopefully I can continue to make it my full-time thing if you guys watch. Anyways, so over the years, just in having conversations with entrepreneurs, I've noticed certain themes come up over and over again. Being an entrepreneur is really hard, and people go through a lot of really tough struggles, way more than anyone cares to talk about. Just this idea of hitting rock bottom on a psychological, emotional, even physical level. Mm-hmm. That is an experience that is common amongst entrepreneurs. And I just feel like when people go through that experience, they feel isolated. The last thing that they want to do is reach out to anybody. But yet, it's an experience that is shared by so many others in a similar position. And so, what if I could create a space that allowed people to get on a platform and be open and vulnerable about those experiences, to help anybody watching or listening feel affirmed in their own experiences? That's all. I know, yes, you're going to be able to learn, the how-tos and get insights, as I was saying before. But I think we have enough information on how to start a business, how to run a business, success principles, et cetera, et cetera. Sometimes all you need to hear is a reason to keep going. Mm-hmm. Don't you think so?
Yeah.
As an entrepreneur?
Totally.
Sometimes you just need someone to tell you to keep going.
Mm-hmm. And also just someone to see that you admire, that they've gone through the same things or something that's hard as well.
Yeah.
That everyone has those processes, and there's no such thing as an overnight success, for example.
For sure.
So what, I guess that's more about what this is, but in terms of you, like, how are you approaching this differently this time?
One thing that I will not compromise on are the basics. So I hope to never compromise on sleep, good nutrition, fitness. I'm very mindful of the relationships in my life. I naturally tend to be a people pleaser. And so if you're in my life, I will do what I can. That's my tendency, is to do what I can to be there for you. And if you are somebody who maybe lacks the effective empathy to be there for me in a similar way, then and if you're someone who is just going to be an energy vampire, then I'm not going to have you in my life anymore. And that's one major difference between the version of me today and the version of me from, like, let's say 2-3 years ago. So what I love this time with Behind the Grind is that I genuinely believe that this is greater than me. This is greater than any esteem needs I might have, any needs for financial security or whatever. Like, truly, to be able to get to this point, I think is a privilege in and of itself. Mm-hmm. I think about my parents, my dad being a refugee. I don't think it ever crosses his mind like, oh, I'm going to do this because it's meaningful, or I'm not going to do that. His motivation was to provide for the family. Mm-hmm. I've gotten to the point where I can choose what to do with my life, and I want to choose something meaningful, and I have chosen that with this project. It's the purpose behind it is something that is greater than me. It's beyond me, and I would imagine now, like, when I run into tough situations in the future, that I can at least know that I'm doing something good, or I'm trying to do something good for others. And that is it's the opposite of ego.
Yeah.
Immediately just thinking about that, it's like, it doesn't have anything to do with me, which enables me more mobility in the things that I do. Does that make sense?
Yeah, definitely. You're
It's kind of paradoxical.
I think it always works out that way, though. The things that people want to pay attention to and the things that are exciting are things that are different and not just like something to get something back, right? They're things that are really exciting to that individual and something that's serving like a unique need or something different, right?
Right.
So.
And also I learned from my therapist that my core values, and it turns out core values are basically words that you can form into ing words, like verbs. For example, you can never do enough of them. They're not goals that you can just knock off your list. So for me, my core values are creating, learning, connecting with people authentically, and as long as I am living a life that is in line with these things that I just listed, that's going to create meaning. That's the formula for living a meaningful life, is living a life that is congruent with your core values.
Well, you're definitely always learning. You're such a nerd.
I know, right? Oh gosh.
No, but you're always learning. It's good. And I think that is so good for you to recognize that at such a young age. I think people really forget that you're like 26. Like, it's really, to have this be your fourth endeavor is crazy, and it's really exciting that you've made it. You've already, and I think just because you've really prioritized mentorship too, you've been able to create, like, you've been able to understand that what the actual purpose behind what these people are doing and what you need to focus on in order to have like true like not only success but growth and creative and outlet and everything like that. So
I'm very focused on the big picture.
Yeah.
That's and understanding how things work in the big picture. And I think, thank you so much for that compliment, by the way, because I don't think about myself that way. I'm just like,
Well, you've always seeked out mentorship, and I think that plays into this, right? You're really giving people that gift of mentorship from online, right? I mean, I think that
hopefully,
yeah.
This is just the first episode.
Definitely. But I do think that you've always prioritized that, and that's really a big contribution to your success, because you've just kind of absorbed all of these successful people's advice and found like the things that work for you in the threads that are similar. So
to hopefully learn from other people's experiences.
Yeah. And know what to prepare for. I think that's what a lot of this is too, right? Knowing what to prepare for, that it's not all easy, and that you're not alone in these issues. So yeah.
Oh, thank you.
Of course.
So
there's some audience questions.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I asked some of my Instagram followers.
Julianne has a lot of followers. More than I ever would dream to have.
I asked some of my Instagram followers to submit questions that I could address on this episode, and they're on your list.
All
so
right.
I think we should just delve right in.
All right, so the first question comes from Andy Kabastian. That's Sebastian with a C. And
Hi.
He asks, do you still want to be an entrepreneur for the rest of your life after being burnt out?
Well, I would like to, but whether I actually continue to, that depends on the people that I am creating value for. If this thing that I, in my mind, am creating value for turns out not to be value at all, and the consumer is like, this is disgusting, I don't want anything to do with it, then I won't survive very long as an entrepreneur within this context.
Maybe answer that again.
No?
No? Okay. It's too negative.
Oh, sorry. That's just like how my mind works.
You're going to be successful with this one.
Well, here's the thing. Okay, this is the beautiful thing that I truly believe about entrepreneurship, is that if you create something of value and other people find it of value, then that's where your success comes from.
Right. That's
so it's one thing to like want to be an entrepreneur. It's another to actually be able to create something of value that people are willing to pay for. Mm-hmm. i.e. my sponsors in the future. We'll see. But yeah, no, I'm a creative person, and I see myself always being creative in whatever capacity.
I, for one, wouldn't be able to see you not doing something interesting and different.
I would be a really bad employee. Like, just my track record has shown that I would not hire me for
She always
anything.
quits and starts something.
Seriously.
And now mate 262 626. Mate 626. They ask, what would you have done differently to avoid the burnout but still achieve your goals?
So I sort of answered that before.
Mm-hmm.
So take care of basics, sleep, fitness, good nutrition, look at the relationships in your life, make sure they're up to par, at the very least not toxic, because that's so important. Letting go of people is really, really hard. I can't tell you how transformative it is.
Otting asks, where does your drive come from?
I think I touched on this before also. I think in part where I come from, where my parents come from is it plays a lot into the narrative of my life that I have in my head. I always knew that my parents raised me to believe that whatever I could set my sights on, I could achieve. And so whether I actually would go on to achieve those things is just a matter of effort. And you can disagree or not with that statement, but I think whether or not it's true, I think you would be better off believing that it is, because what else are you gonna do? You're just gonna like sit in a corner and completely watch your potential go by? I don't know. That's a really hard question. Also, I'm young, so why not?
Your drive is from why not, right? Take risks or else it won't
Also, having an ego. I still have a big ego. I really need to work on this, but sometimes it is activating. Yeah.
Yeah.
I genuinely believe I have good ideas.
Yeah. I mean, that's a really great asset to have. I think some people they sit on their ideas thinking they're not good enough for too long, for sure. Right. And so now that you're working on this and so before you used to go into a room full of like a team and they would all be waiting for you there, and now you're kind of on your own in this journey. I mean, you have your team, but every day, like, can you walk us through what your daily routine is like and how you know what to focus on first versus what to put aside for later? And
so because I'm in a startup pre-revenue phase again, so much is, I don't really have a routine with regards to the work that I do. I just know what I need to get done. And that doesn't faze me because I've been here before. In this period where things are so chaotic, one of the things that is really important to me is being consistent about my own personal self-care routines, because that would be the only way I can instill some routine into my day-to-day life. Right. What I love about where I am now is truly I am better able to take care of myself than I've ever been. I'm eating right, I'm sleeping right, I'm working out. It's just, and yes, I'll still have hard days, but I feel capable of taking on those days more than I've ever felt. With regards to Behind the Grind, my number one priority is meeting entrepreneurs with a story, entrepreneurs with a willingness to share their hardships. And you guys will see in the episodes ahead, these guests are way better than me when it comes to sharing their stories and
you've done a great job today.
Oh, shucks. But seriously, my guests, I am in awe of them. We have people who, for example, I met someone who's going to be on this podcast soon. He has a story of losing his business partner in a plane crash.
Crazy.
And then also like rebuilding from that. We have a guest who lives with an invisible disability. She runs, in my mind, like a really successful business. They are the best of the best. Again, I surround myself with good people at what they do, but yet she is legally blind. And so she is going to share with us what that experience is like. And I have a guest who I almost didn't even approach for this show because in my mind I thought like he has everything made. He exists on a completely different plane. Sold his first company at 16 for $1 million. Now runs like a really fast growing companies. But in between his first and his third business, he has a story of failure which really shook up his paradigm, his worldview, and for a time found it really difficult to get out of bed every day. So even he has a story of hitting rock bottom. All of these stories I'm so motivated to share with people, and I know that the viewers will find some inspiration from them. My biggest priority is to continue to find these stories, because at the end of the day, this is what the show is about.
Something that's really funny about both of us is that we had very different impressions of each other when we saw each other as sort of the cleaned up version.
Yeah, at the height of at the beginning of all this.
At the beginning of our startups, and then we were working on the same client, and then we ended up meeting that way through like a meeting, so we were in a very professional space as well.
Yeah.
But yeah, how do you feel that, like for me, the impression of you has changed quite a bit because I saw you come in, you're like definitely still very like confident and assertive and bold, but you were not like there was this like warmth that I saw after, more like getting to know each other more. And then also you're way more open and vulnerable than I would have expected, you know, and because you're very perfect.
Oh, shush.
You are.
I can
You're always
definitely
like
see
very
why you said that.
perfect, and yeah. And then just like to see, it was really good to know how supportive you were and open and vulnerable, basically. Yeah.
That I could be.
Mm-hmm. I mean, I think that happens with everyone.
I think the version of me that you met initially when we were working on that same client 4 years ago was somebody who really cared about the impression that she gave off. It was almost as if I had no space for vulnerability, and as a result, no space to genuinely connect with anybody. I think that's one of the reasons why we never really hit it off when we first met.
I mean, it was also
I'll be super honest, Rebecca.
Yeah.
I saw you as competition. And I look back and I'm like, had I not seen you as competition, had I gone to that interaction, had I approached that interaction with a genuine intent to connect, I would have been able to become friends with you sooner.
Right.
And so I think about all those years in which like you could have been in my life, but you weren't, because I decided to show up as whatever version of myself, perfect or whatever.
But I think, yeah, it's so funny because we're not really competition in what we do at all, really, or what you did. But also, I guess, just that idea of like seeing other entrepreneurs as competition is sort of like as soon as you start to see where the potential to like collaborate or like when that connection happens, it's so magical. Actually, who was like the first entrepreneur that you kind of connected with where you were like, oh, like this isn't competition anymore, I can see why it's like they're human too, and it's valuable to like connect in an authentic
Can I
way.
be honest with you?
Yeah.
I think it was you.
Really?
Like when we reconnected, I'm not even kidding. This is what I mean.
That's so
like
funny.
I was so emotionally dumb. Like I just had the wrong mindset in the beginning of all this. I wish, But the thing is, like, again, it takes a lot of courage to be vulnerable, to show up as you are. And I think for me, it was a process to get to a place where I could be comfortable just being myself. In the beginning, I was hyper vigilant about the way I came across, and so much so that it really stood in the way of me making genuine connections with people. I had huge imposter syndrome. Huge imposter syndrome. And
like it's just how people are in our, like when you're that age, you know, and when you're starting something like that, there's so much that you have to, I mean, you have imposter syndrome, but you also have a very real group of, well, when you're that age, right? Like I'm even talking about me too. Like you had so many people just dismissing you right off the bat, kind of thing. So it was real too. It wasn't just like imposter
especially
syndrome
coming
in your
from
head
the startup
or
world.
paranoia. Yeah.
For me, coming from the startup world and the world of tech, oh my gosh.
Yeah, tech world's crazy. I only was introduced to that through you going to an event with you, because I come more from the creative agency side, and people are a bit more
liberal and open and not sexist.
Yeah, I mean, like I've definitely, we'll talk about that later, but like I definitely had sexist things, but not, it's not as prominent as the tech industry. That was crazy.
I had a real chip on my shoulder. I'll be super honest. I felt like whatever I did, I had to be like twice as good, because people were going to judge me for being young, for being a woman, for being et cetera, et cetera. So it's just so nice to not have to think about those things as much. Now when
clears so much brain space.
Seriously. Now when I run into a situation in which someone is mistreating me because of reasons I can't change, instead of internalizing that, I'm just like, okay, well, I can just not associate with you anymore.
Right.
Goodbye. There are plenty of people out there who have the same values that I have, who aren't gonna be sexist or ageist or whatever. People, like, there's so many people out there, and the amount of time and energy that I used to spend, worrying over the people who didn't approve of me, like, that is the same energy that I could invest into really good people instead.
Yeah, 100%. So after that first meeting where I was like, this lady is scary and intimidating, and I don't know if she likes me, and it turns out you might have thought I was an enemy, so I guess that checks out. But after that, we met again because you were on Instagram, you were showing that you got a new little baby, Chadley, and here he is.
So this is last year. Last year I got a dog.
Yeah.
So I know this is terrible. I would not recommend this to anyone. Looking back, it was totally irresponsible of me.
Yeah.
But this little puppy here is the best thing that's ever happened to me. He's not a puppy anymore technically, but
no, we still
he'll always be a puppy to me.
I have a dog as well.
Yes.
And so we met up because I was adoring Chadley here as a little
So I
baby.
got a dog last summer. I started posting about him, and then all of a sudden I was noticing that you were commenting on all of my posts. You were responding to all of my stories. I was like, I know this girl. We met years before.
I just like boldly message people, especially with dogs. Like, there's no hold bar.
I was like, how long has she been following me? I wasn't even aware. But I was like, oh, you have a dog too? Let's meet up. And oh my gosh, we really hit it off.
Yeah. And it might have been the alcohol, but it could have been our personalities.
But
as well.
also, we had no like agenda going into it. Or for me at least, I was just...
No, it was just like
ego
connecting.
To protect it. It was just like, yeah, you have a dog, I have a dog. Let's connect. And it turns out we had so much more in common. And in that short period of time since last summer, you've become one of my best friends. So yeah, this is just gonna be a love fest. That's it for episode 1. Thank you guys so much for joining. Before I sign off, I want to tell you 3 things. 1, hit the subscribe button to be notified of future episodes. Number 2, we're on Facebook, Twitter, and Instagram, so follow us there too. And number 3, a huge shout out to my wonderful interviewer and guest today, Rebecca Rochon. If you want to follow Rebecca and her company, Pivot and Pilot Creative, check out the links in the description box below. And lastly, thank you to you guys, my wonderful viewers and listeners. This is episode 1. We'll have more coming, and I cannot wait to see where this goes.